Forward to the first edition. The 4 essays published in this volume were not written at one time or conceived with any intentional connection between them in idea or purpose. The first was written in the early months of the war, 2 others when it was closing, the last recently during the formation and first operations of that remarkably ill-jointed, stumbling, and hesitating machine, the League of Nations. But still, they happen to be bound together by a common idea, or at least look at 4 related subjects from a single general standpoint. The obvious but practically quite forgotten truth that the destiny of the race in this age of crisis and revolution will depend much more on the spirit which we are than on the machinery we shall use. A few words on the present bearing of this truth by way of forward may not be out of place. The whole difficulty of the present situation turns upon the peculiar and critical character of the age in which we are living. It is a period of immense and rapid changes, so swift that few of us who live among them can hope to seize their whole burden or their inmost meaning, or to form any safe estimate of their probable outcome. Great hopes are abroad. High and large ideals fill the view. Enormous forces are in the field. It is one of those vast critical moments in the life of the race when all is pressing towards change and reconstitution. The ideals of the future, especially the ideals of freedom, equality, commonality, unity, are demanding to be brought out from their limited field in the spiritual life, or the idealism of the few, and to be given some beginning of a true soul of action and bodily shape in the life of the race. But banded against any such fulfillment, there are powerful obstacles, and the greatest of them come not from outside, but from within. For they are the old continued impulsions and obstinate recalcitrance of mankind's past nature, the almost total subjection of its normal mind to egoistic, vital, and material interests and ambitions which make not for union, but for strife and discord. The plausibilities of the practical reason, which looks at the possibilities of the day and the morrow and shuts its eyes to the consequences of the day after. The habits of pretense and fiction, which impel men and nations to pursue and forward their own interest under the camouflage of a specious idealism, a habit made up only partly of the diplomatic hypocrisy of politicians, but much more of a general half-voluntary self-deception, and finally, the inrush of blinder, unsatisfied forces and crude, imperfect idealisms, of such is the creed of Bolshevism, to take advantage of the unrest and dissatisfaction prevalent in such times and lay hold for a while on the life of mankind. It is these things which we see dominant around us, and not in the least degree any effort to be of the right spirit and evolve from it the right method. The one way out, harped on by the modern mind, which has been as much blinded as enlightened by the victories of physical science, is the approved Western device of salvation by machinery. Get the right kind of machine to work, and everything can be done. This seems to be the modern creed. But the destinies of mankind cannot be turned out to order in an American factory. It is a subtler thing than that which is now putting its momentous problem before us. And if the spirit of the things we profess is absent or falsified, no method or machinery can turn them out for us or deliver the promised goods. That is the one truth which the scientific and industrialized modern mind forgets always, because it looks at process and commodity and production and ignores the spirit in man and the deeper inner law of his being. The elimination of war is one of the cherished ideals and expectations of the age. But what lies at the root of this desire? A greater unity of heart, sympathy, understanding between men and nations, a settled will to get rid of national hatreds, greeds, ambitions, all the fertile seeds of strife and war? If so, it is well with us, and success will surely crown our efforts. But of this deeper thing, there may be something in sentiment, but there is still very little in action and dominant motive. For the masses of men, the idea is rather to labor and produce, and amass at ease and in security, without the disturbance of war. For the statesmen and governing classes, the idea is to have peace and security, for the maintenance of past acquisitions and an untroubled domination and exploitation of the world by the great highly organized imperial and industrial nations, without the perturbing appearance of new unsatisfied hungers and the peril of violent unrests, revolts, revolutions. War, it was hoped at one time, would eliminate itself by becoming impossible. But that delightfully easy solution no longer commands credit. But now it is hoped to conjure or engineer it out of existence by the machinery of a league of victorious nations, admitting the rest, some if they will, others whether they like it or not, as subordinate partners or as protégés. In the magic of this just and beautiful arrangement, the intelligence and goodwill of closeted statesmen and governments, supported by the intelligence and goodwill of the peoples, is to combine and accommodate interests, to settle or evade difficulties, to circumvent the natural results, the inevitable karma of national selfishness and passions, and to evolve out of the present chaos a fair and charmingly well-mechanized cosmos of international order, security, peace, and welfare. Get the clockwork going, put your pennyworth of excellent professions or passably good intentions in the slot, and all will go well. This seems to be the principle. But it is too often the floor of hell that is paved with these excellent professions and passable intentions, and the cause is that while the better reason and will of man may be one hopeful factor in nature, they are not the whole of nature and existence, and not by any means the whole of our human nature. There are other and very formidable things in us and in the world, and if we juggle with them or put on them in order to get them admitted, these masks of reason and sentiment, as unfortunately we have all the habit of doing, and that is still the greater part of the game of politics. The results are a foregone conclusion. War and violent revolution can be eliminated if we will, though not without immense difficulty, but on the condition that we get rid of the inner causes of war and the constantly accumulating karma of successful injustice, of which violent revolutions are the natural reactions. Otherwise, there can be only at best a fallacious period of artificial peace. What was in the past will be sown still in the present, and continue to return on us in the future. The intelligent mind, or the best intellectual reason and science of man, are not the sole disposers of our future. Fortunately, for the order of things, a greater unseen power, a universal will, or, if you please, a universal force or law is there, which not only gives us all the framework and conditions of our idea and effort, but evolves by them and by the law of these conditions out of the thing in being, the thing that is to be. And this power deals with us not so much according to the devices of our reason, the truths or fictions of our intelligence, but much rather according to the truth of what man is and the real soul and meaning of what he does. God is not to be deceived, says the Scripture. The modern mind does not believe in God, but it believes in nature. But nature, too, is not to be deceived. She enforces her law. She works out always her results from the thing that really is, and from the real spirit and character of the energy we put into action. And this, especially, is one of the ages in which mankind is very closely put to the question. The hopes, the ideals, the aspirations that are abroad in it are themselves so many severe and pregnant questions put to us, not merely to our intelligence, but to the spirit of our being and action. In this fateful examination, it is not skill and cleverness, machinery and organization which will ultimately prevail. That was the faith which Germany professed, and we know how it ended. But the truth and sincerity of our living. It is not impossible for man to realize his ideals so that he may move on to yet greater, undreamed things, but on condition that he makes them totally an inner in order that they may become too an outer reality. The changes which this age of reconstruction portends will certainly come, but the gain they will bring to humanity depends on the spirit which governs us during the time of their execution. We of today have not the excuse of ignorance, since we have before us perfectly clear ideals and conditions. Freedom and unity, the self-determination of men and nations, in the framework of a life drawn together by cooperation, comradeship, brotherhood, if it may be. The acceptance of a close interrelation of the common aims and interests of the race, an increasing oneness of human life, in which we cannot deny any longer to others what we claim for ourselves, or things of which we have formed a definite conception. The acknowledgement of them is there in the human mind, but not as yet any settled will to practice. Words and professions are excellent things in themselves, and we will do them all homage. But facts are for the present more powerful, and the facts will have their results, but the results which we deserve, and not those aimed at by our egoism. The principle of self-determination is not in itself a chimera. It is only that if we choose to make it so. It is the condition of the better order of the world, which we wish to bring into being, and to make jettison of it at the very first opportunity is an unpromising beginning for so great and difficult an endeavor. Self-determination is not a principle which can stand by itself and be made the one rule to be followed. No principle can rightly stand in that way, isolated and solely dominant in the complicated web of life. And if we so treat it, it gets falsified in its meaning and loses much of its virtue. Moreover, individual self-determination must harmonize with a common self-determination. Freedom must move in the frame of unity, or towards the realization of a free unity. And it may readily be conceded to the opportunist, the practical man, and all the minds that find a difficulty in looking beyond the circumstances of the past and present, that there are in very many instances great difficulties in the way of applying the principle immediately and in its full degree. But when, in the light of a great revealing moment, a principle of this kind has been recognized not only as an ideal, but as a clear condition of the result at which we aim, it has to be accepted as a leading factor of the problem to be worked out. The difficulties sincerely considered and met, and a way found by which, without evasion or equivocation, and without unnecessary delay, it can be developed and given its proper place in the solution. But it is the very opposite method that has been adopted by the governments of the world and admitted by its peoples. The natural result is that things are being worked out in the old way with a new name, or at the most with some halting change and partial improvement of the method. The botched constitution and limping action of the League of Nations is the result of this ancient maneuver. The League has been got into being by sacrificing the principles which governed the idea behind its inception. The one thing that has been gained is a formal, regularized, and established instrument by which the governments of the leading nations can meet together habitually, consult, accommodate their interests, give some kind of consideration to the voice and the claim of the smaller free nations, try to administer with a common understanding certain common or conflicting interests, delay dangerous outbreaks and collisions, or minimize them when they come, govern the life of the nations that are not free and not already subjects of the successful empires under the cover of a mandate instead of the rough and tumble chances of a scramble for markets, colonies, and dependencies. The machine does not seem to be acting, even for these ends, with any remarkable efficiency. But it is at least something. It may be said that it can be got to act at all. In any case, it is an accomplished fact, which has to be accepted without enthusiasm, for it merits none, but with a practical acquiescence or an enforced recognition. All the more reason that the imperfections it embodies and the evils and dangers its action involves or keeps in being should not be thrust into the background, but kept in the full light, so that the imperfections may be recognized and mended, and there may be some chance of avoiding the worst incidents of the threatened evils and dangers. And all the more reason, too, that the ideals which have been ignored or converted in the practice into a fiction should insist on themselves and, defrauded of the present, still lift their voice to lay their claim on the future. For these ideals stand, and they represent the greater aims of the spirit in man, which through all the denials, obstacles, and imperfections of his present incomplete nature, knows always the perfection towards which it moves, and the greatness of which it is capable. Circumstance and force and external necessity and past nature may still be too strong for us. The Rudra powers still govern our destinies, and the lords of truth and justice and the lords of love have to wait for their reign. But if the light of the ideal is kept burning in its flame of knowledge and its flame of power, it will seize even on these things and create out of their evil its greater, inevitable good. At present, it may seem only an idea and a word unable to become a living reality. But it is the idea and the word expressing what was concealed in the Spirit which preside over creation. The time will come when they will be able to seize on the force that works and turn it into the instrument of a greater and fairer creation. The nearness or the distance of the time depends on the fidelity of the mind and will of man to the best that he sees, and the insistence of his self-knowledge. Unobsessed by subjection to the circumstances he suffers and the machinery he uses, to live out its truth within himself so that his environment may accept it and his outward life be shaped in its image.